Hello everyone. We are going to learn the data definition language families of structured query language in this video. So as I told you in the previous video that any command that can affect the structure of the data that would belong to this data definition language family. So the command that we are going to learn is a create schema command. This command is used to create a logical partition in SQL Server, and this command is used to create a complete database in Oracle. So this create is a keyword, this schema is a keyword, while this DB is a user defined name which is provided for that newly created database if we are applying this command in Oracle. And if we are applying this command in SQL Server, so this name would be assigned to a logical partition. From here you may notice that we have used the small case lowercase letters. So basically SQL is a case insensitive language, so you can write create like this as well, because we can write using any of the case, as I told you that it's a case insensitive language. So this is the first command in data definition language, and these semicolons, they are used to terminate the SQL statement. So we may write different SQL statements together, and this semicolon would be used to terminate those SQL statements. Another thing that is important to convey is that basically it's not a programming language, right? So any SQL statement you can say that that's a complete program. Okay, so these three words, they basically you can view them or you can understand them as a complete program. So the next command that we are going to discuss is a create table command. A create table command is used to create a table in a database. So once we have created the database, then next is to define the descriptions of all of the relations in that particular database. So relation or table, they basically are the same thing as I have told you, but relation has different attributes, different characteristics. So when I use this word table, you should understand that I'm talking about the relation, because there is no concept of a basic table in relational databases. So in order to create a table, first of all, this create keyword is written, then table keyword is written, then a user defined name for that table that we want to create is provided. For example, we want to create a students table, so this name student is provided over here. We can go to multiple lines, because line basically going into a new line is not an indication of the termination of the statement. Rather, a semicolon basically tells tells the DBMS that this is the termination of the SQL statement. So after writing name of the relation, these brackets they are used, and then all of the columns, their names and their types and their sizes, they are provided. For example, student ID, for example, we want to add this column, and for example the type that we want to assign to this column is number, for example. And we can also provide the size of number, and in number we can also provide the decimal places. Okay, so this 0 tells that 11 is the size, and no digit would be allowed after the decimal point. Then this comma is used in order to differentiate different columns. Okay, so for example, next column is the name column, so we just write the name. So this student ID and this name, these are basically the user provided variables or names. And for example, the type is, for example, var char, which is basically variable character, and for example this is the size that we want to assign. And once we are done with defining all of the columns, providing the names and the types and the sizes, then we can apply some key constraints. Okay, for example, we want to define a primary or a foreign key, we can do that right after providing the definitions of all of the columns. So for example, I want to declare this student ID as the primary key. So in order to do that, I can write constraint, then I need to provide a user defined name. For example, I write stpk in order to show that it's student's primary key. So this stpk is the name of the constraint, because these constraints, they would also be stored somewhere by DBMS, so they would be recognized by these user defined names which are provided over here. Then primary key is a keyword in order to define the primary key constraint, and then within brackets name of the column is provided. Since I want to apply this constraint on student ID, so this student ID would be provided over here, and once this command would be executed, a relation named student would be added to the database with two columns, a student ID and name. Okay, and the student ID would be basically the primary key, because I have applied the primary key constraint. Next is a foreign key constraint. Okay, so for example, we have two different relations. Okay, for example, we have already created this student relation. Okay, and let's assume that there are three columns. The first is SID and the second is name, and let's assume the third is DID, which basically is a foreign key. Okay, and for example, we have we are going to establish this second relation, which is department, for example, and for example, this department has DID as the primary key, and for example, title is for example a column's name in this particular relation, and this relation is for example the student's relation. Okay, so while defining this student relation, because we want to add this primary key into this student relation, so while writing the definition of this particular relation, I would basically specify the foreign key constraint. Okay, so for example, now I am going to write a query, for example, to declare to create this particular relation. Okay, let's assume this relation is not already there. Okay, so same create command would be used, create keyword, table keyword, and student, which is the name of this particular relation which is to be created. Okay, let's assume this relation is not there. Okay, and let's assume that this relation is there. This has not been created, but for example, this department relation is already created, and this has to be created because we are going to reference this foreign key to this primary key, so this has to be there. If this is not there, we would not be able to apply this foreign key constraint. Okay, so after providing the name, then names of the columns, they are provided. So SID is the first column, so number is the type, and for example 8 is the size, comma, name. Okay, for example, this is variable character 2, and for example this is the size, and then for example DID. Now I'm going to define this DID as a number. Okay, so first I need to define this, and for example 10 is the size. Then here I'll write the constraint of the primary key that we have just seen. Okay, and after writing that constraint, now I'm going to define the constraint of foreign key. So in order to define that constraint, I'll write constraint keyword, then a user defined name. For example, I can say DEPT foreign key. Okay, and then I'll write FOREIGN foreign key. Okay, so this is the keyword. Foreign key is a keyword, and then I'll write name of the column. Okay, name of the column in this particular relation, which is basically the foreign key, so that is DID, and then I need to specify that to which particular relation and to which particular column of that particular relation this foreign key references. So in order to specify that, we use this references keyword. Okay, references, and then I need to provide the name of that particular relation. Okay, for example, so name is DEPT, and then I need to provide the name of the column. Okay, so this is the name of the column, which is basically the primary key of that particular relation. Okay, so now once this statement is executed, this student relation would be created, and this DID would be added, as we have defined this DID to be added over here, and this constraint would be defined somewhere and would be stored somewhere, and this DID of this particular relation would reference to the department relation's primary key. So this is how we can use this foreign key constraint in order to specify that a foreign key of a particular relation references to primary key of another relation.